Hi everybody, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. So, in my last video I talked about the attributes of the impersonal God, and in this video I'm talking about why you should care. So in my last video I discussed the impersonal God, and I'll link that video in the description below, and I discussed that impersonal God according to its most commonly accepted attributes. And those attributes are, broadly speaking, that it is eternal, formless, boundless, that from which all things come and to which all things return, that which is encompassing all things and is simultaneously beyond everything we know in this universe. It governs all that is, as it is the source of all of the laws of existence, and it is that which is constant and absolute. And when we have an experience of that, we experience it as pure awareness, and we also experience it as pure bliss. So that, broadly speaking, describes the impersonal God. Okay, so we've got this thing which is infinite and gave rise to everything, but I haven't described a God that cares about people or anything that happens to them in this life. I haven't described a God that is capable of loving anybody, or so it seems. So then, what is the point of even acknowledging such an impersonal God? And how can believing in an impersonal God such as I have described it ever help us or inspire us to be better people, or to live a life of meaning and purpose that is dedicated towards some higher goal or some greater good? And how can it bring us any sort of comfort? And that's what I'm going to go through today. Just because something is transcendent and impersonal, it doesn't mean that it can't fill us with a sense of wonder and awe. I mean, if you've ever looked up at the night sky or you've looked at a sunset, you know that those things aren't alive, that they're not a person that you can talk to, but you still feel inspired by them. You still feel a sense of awe in their presence. And just because something is not a personal being, although it's easier to love a person, people love all sorts of things. People fall in love with their cars, very materialistic people. So the human concept of love is very versatile, and we can have a love for all sorts of things that are impersonal. We can love being in nature. And in the same way, we can love an impersonal God. The reasons why the impersonal divinity that I've described is important to the spiritual path is because when you have that experience of God, when you have that direct connection with God, it transforms you. It's the kind of experience that changes you and changes the way that you perceive things. So as an example, when you have an insight or an experience into God, you realize how everything is connected to everything else. You realize that all of the seeming divisions between things, whether it's physical phenomena in the universe, whether it's individual people, or even nations, or species, you start to realize that those divisions are false and that everything is connected and that everything is, in a sense, one organism. Because you've started to break down those divisions as you approach the transcendent reality that is God. And so it helps you to see that the greater unity in all things, and it helps you to engender compassion towards all things, because you can acknowledge that those divisions are really illusory. Similarly, knowing God, even as an impersonal force, brings a sense of comfort and well-being and even freedom. Because when you enter into the experience of God and you feel that bliss that I had discussed in my previous video, what you're really feeling is a perfect satisfaction you're feeling a satisfaction that is not dependent on anything in the world. And so it is perfect and pure happiness. It is perfect and pure liberation. And that is the thing that we're all looking for. And once we've found it, that is a life that has been well lived. And we can have that once we have a direct experience of God as I've described it. And finally, knowing the impersonal God is important because when you discover that, when you have the direct experience of God, you finally know what you truly are. And we all have a sense of alienation in this world. Like, we don't know who we are. We don't know what we're supposed to do, what we're here for. And we have all of these questions that go to the heart of us and our ability to self-actualize. And we have this personality that we're very careful about curating. But that never brings us a sense of joy because our personality is always changing, and it's always determined not ever by ourselves, but always by our social upbringing or other things that are beyond our control. And it's always based on things that are superficial, and so we can never find satisfaction that way by just curating our personality. There is something that is truly us, which is beyond our body and which is beyond our mind. It's even deeper than those things which pass away, arise and pass away, but there is that which remains beneath all of that. And as we come to know ourselves, we come to realize that we are not our bodies and we are not our mind. And there is something else there that is the true essence of what we are. And when we discover that, it is the most incredibly liberating and satisfying experience that we can have. And this is what Eckhart Tolle talks about when he talks about his spiritual awakening, where he woke up one day incredibly depressed and he said, "How can I live with myself?" And at that moment, he realized that there was a distinction between the I and himself. And what was that distinction? Why was he thinking of himself in the third person? It's because pure awareness is not the mind that identifies as a certain person. Pure awareness is awareness itself, without limit. It can be anything, and it's something that we all share. It is something that every person in existence truly is. And that is what you are. And to come to that revelation, to come to that understanding is a truly profound thing. And so these are all ways that the divine can give us perfect satisfaction, can reveal the truth of things to us, and so give meaning to our lives in an incredible way. And it gives a meaning of such incredible depth that it is unshakable. So that's all well and good, but what about morality? Having a moral compass or a moral understanding of human life is something that is fundamental to being a spiritual person, as I myself have said on this channel. So the impersonal God that I've described seems to be divorced from that idea of morality. In fact, I've said that an impersonal God would be amoral, and that a universe governed by such a divinity would be an amoral universe, as indeed the Tao Te Ching says. So then, if we live in an amoral universe, and we have an amoral conception of divinity, how then can we have morality that comes from the divine? And there is a bit of a mystery in that, because human beings are more directly responsible for morality than perhaps we give ourselves credit for. But there is a way to understand morality and why we should be moral creatures, even when we are faced with an amoral universe and an impersonal God. And the way to understand that is by understanding the higher laws that do govern existence. We have a universe of polarized forces which are moving and shifting, but everything in the universe is part of a greater harmony, and all of the things in the universe balance one another out so that there's always a state of equilibrium that the universe is striving to return towards. And if one thing throws the balance out, if one force in the universe creates disequilibrium, there will always be a countervailing force to restore the balance. And so that is the great universal order that we live within. And human beings are a part of that universe. And we have ideas of fairness in human societies, fairness and justice. And what is the symbol of justice in many societies? It's the scales. The idea of fairness and justice is that there should be an equilibrium in the way that people are treated, and there should be give and take in the way that people are treated. So that idea of justice and fairness, which is so closely associated with morality, that is something which, although it is undoubtedly a human idea, it would not have entered our consciousness, would not have been concocted by our brains, save for the fact that we live in a universe which does follow those laws of balance and equilibrium. And we are simply recognizing that in the context of human relations when we come up with ideas like justice and fairness. Another thing that is fundamental to a moral understanding of human life is the idea of love and of compassion in particular. And again, this description of divinity that I've given and having an experience of that will give us a better understanding of that concept of love. And if you think about where our sense of love or empathy comes from, it is recognizing something in another person or another being which we care about as though we would care about ourselves. And it's acknowledging that there is value in preserving not only ourselves, but our community, our world, and acknowledging that we are a part of that. And when you start to break down the boundaries of existence by approaching the concept of divinity, and you begin to realize the underlying unity of all things, it becomes easier for you to engender that compassion for other beings and for you to identify with them, to identify with their hopes, to identify with their suffering. And so understanding divine unity and even understanding that is mysteriously related to the human idea of love can be an incredible force for forging connections and uniting more and more of the human race. And so that is another great mystery of the divine. And it's another way that by understanding divinity we can enrich the human experience here on earth and give real meaning to people's lives. So that is why it is important to know and understand God and experience God irrespective of whether God is personal or impersonal. I'll do a subsequent video where I talk about how we can come to know God even more. But until then, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.